2 o'clock by my watch, so, are we on?
Yep, you're on.
In case anybody joins us, remotely. In order to, my name's Mark Dakota. I'm the town manager in Waterville Valley and the chair of the joint board. Thank you, everyone, for coming and taking the time to, have this annual meeting of the Coalition Communities 2.0. I'd like to begin the meeting by starting with Bonnie and going around the room. If you could tell us your name and the community you're representing. Our quorum is 1/3 of the membership, so that's 9 or more people and 9 or more communities. I think we have 10, but let's see. So,
Bonnie Maroney, Town of Carroll.
Mary Murphy, Town of Bridgewater.
Dan representing Newton. Charlie.
go to Waterville Valley.
Merrill Bernstein, sure.
Mulholland City, Lebanon.
Sabrina Park, I'm the town.
Great. We have regularly, roughly monthly, the joint board, and that is composed of Sean and Terry and Paul and myself. We are down one member from the joint board, an elected official. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But we have regular monthly meetings, so my next item of business is the review and approval of the August joint board meeting minutes. I'd like to do that.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, those are approved. Our next item of business, and I am moving down the agenda as it was sent out in the notice of the in-person full board meeting. The next item of business is communications and legislative update.
Great.
So I'll turn it over to Jim.
Great, thank you, Mark, and good to be with you all and to meet several of you for the first time. I think it might make sense to start on the legislative side first. We're coming out of obviously we're not in session right now. We're in an election season, so you all just run elections in your towns in the primary. So over the summer, the legislature is fairly quiet. In July and August, typically there are no meetings, nothing happening. In September, we begin to see then an uptick in some of the work sessions on retained bills held. And so there are a few updates on that that I think Kathy can share with you. And then we can talk a little bit about what to expect here over the next few months going forward. So, Kathy.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. Good to see everybody, the new faces. How are you? I wish it was a better day for travel, but it is what it is. So it's, this time of year is interesting that the Senate does not have work sessions. They're done. They may vote bills in term study, but outside, several committees have a meeting on bills that we've been following on behalf of. Let me just state that bills voted in term study in the second year of a legislature are pretty much a light way of killing the bill. Some committees will work on bills. Others won't because they're like, we got a new body, new bills we following that had work sessions this week. Both House Bill 504, as you recall, was the state education property tax and the low and moderate income homeowners property tax relief package, a long title. That was before House Ways and Means. They had much discussion on it on Tuesday, and their recommendation, the only thing committees can do, one of two things: recommend or not recommend future. House Ways Committee voted recommend future legislation, and it was 16-0. And I apologize to keep peeking at my. Stepping back, what does that mean? There's a consensus that we should address it, especially for low and moderate income. How do you do that? That's where the debate will come. So that was the recommendation, and the prime sponsor of it, Representative Ames, I want to say Sean, is he Lebanon, or is your area? No, he's, maybe he's salty, he's out that way. He most likely will bring something in. Representative Pat Abrami from Stratham, fine, but we have 2 court cases that are pending. So what do we do? Well, how do you want to address it? They agree, then there's how do we do it? Holding that thought, jumping to House Education, they took up on the same day House Bill 1680, which was Representative Luna's bill from Hopkinton, establishing a foundation opportunity budget program for funding public education. Again, in nutshell, as they sit there, it's funny. So, and this is just a statement, I'm not taking sides, but when you're sitting in the room to the left, the Democrats are sitting there, and they're saying, yes, we need to address, and they tout, and they all had their copies of Our Schools, Our Kid, if you recall from that commission, was that in 2020? So they like that. On the right side, the Republicans are sitting, they don't have their book, but they all agree, again, something needs to be done, but how do you do it? Republicans are leaning and saying, look, you just can't keep throwing money at a problem. That's the problem. They talk about accountability. We're giving funding. Now, what's, how are the test scores? How are the students? Are they passing? Are they not? Are they graduating? What's the percentage that goes on a higher education? So they're looking more at accountability. The other side of the room, they're saying, well, in order to get there, you have to fund what is necessary. So, again, they agree something needs to be done. What is that something? So, basically, their House Ways and Means is done. They basically agreed, yes, we need to do something, especially for low, income. Let me just add that House Bill 504, part of that is in a section of 1680. So, again, they'll agree we should. Again, the House Education is going to meet on Tuesday, October 3rd, I believe it is, to continue discussions on House Bill 1680. In the meantime, it was interesting that now on the Democrat side, Dave Luna takes charge, and he agrees, we need to fix it, and they talk about it. What's interesting, what's happening right now, we had the first window of legislative service requests for file bills. David Luna has filed the bill. Pretty much the same thing, establishing a foundation opportunity budget program. So identical title. It's a title only. We will not have the meat of the bill on the holidays, probably. And Representative Rick Ladd, Haverhill, who's the chair of House Education, you talk about accountability. He has already filed the bill establishing research and improvement of performance data analysis under the Department of Education. So we have this huge agreement. We need to do something. Again, they all agree. We understand the 2 court cases pending, what will happen, and when. So it's interesting, and pretty much that's where they are. So on House Bill 1680, they did not take vote for future recommendations. Representative Ladd wants to, but it's obviously the train's moving. I'll stop there if anyone has any questions. Have the correct, jump in if I'm incorrect. The first one I think is Conval, but that I understand is more about the adequacy in funding. Recent one, and that was brought up in the work session for 503, is 2 property owners. Steve Rand, Ms. Dr. Gabrelli versus the state of New Hampshire. That seemed to be more with the assessment and the taxation of property. They're 2 different, similar but different.
I wonder, Jane, I don't know if you want to jump in on this.
Yes, I think Conval, as you've said, on a long time, and it was remembered. I recall in the trial for that, it's got a lot of procedural fights. So they're still in the discovery stage, and that's, voluminous amounts of information fighting over what that. trying to remember the trial date. I want to say January of 20.
Google it.
Find it. Anyway, that's moving along. Not as familiar with the new case, but that one is to be supported by the New Hampshire Fair. On the funding formula and the taxation that's particularly more focused on those subjects. I'm not sure procedurally. That'll take, presumably, it'll take years because whoever.
Right, and I just, there was just, on that point, Andy Valinsky, is counsel, and John Tobin are counsel for the second case that was just filed. Of course, they were involved in the original Claremont suits years and years ago. And there was news coverage of that suit where I think they suggested that their case could be merged and joined with the Conval case, to which Mike Tierney, who's representing the plaintiffs there, said, no way. This totally different cases, and wasn't supportive of that at all. So, but in any event, you're right, there's been a lot of motion practice in the first case. I think it might be even further out, maybe spring of '23, I think. We can update the docket and check that, but yeah, there are two cases that deal, on some of these issues that we've seen and being in the hearings and listening. The legislators are clearly nervous of getting too far out in front of these court cases, understanding that it could fundamentally change the landscape and that they're dealing with, so.
I think the second is definitely, obviously, we're also the portion of the tax make it, arguments are just looking at the how education.
Stay tuned, I guess, so.
Yeah, so just kind of some additional background information, and I apologize if this is, the joint board is certainly familiar with this conversation, we've had it, but for everybody else, so the bill filing period that Kathy mentioned, there is a short window early on for incumbents to file what's called a title, an LSR, with no language behind it, but we can kind of glean from the title what it's gonna be about. If that incumbent happens to lose their election, then the title goes away. Kind of a funny thing that they do, and that's on the House side. The real big window of bill filing that we're gonna see is right after the election in November. There'll be a 2-week window where we're gonna just see a flood of titles come in. So we already know from talking to legislators and seeing this initial tranche of LSRs that there'll be some bills that are touch and concern interest to you. But I do expect in November, we'll see a lot of that activity. And the big question is gonna be, is there a shift in control of the bodies here? It's hard to say right now. I think folks presume the Senate will likely remain Republican. I think the House is more in question. It's closely contested right now. There's not a large margin between the parties, and that'll obviously dictate who controls the committees, and therefore who controls the agenda and what bills may get more traction than others. But that's something that we'll know here in about 6-7 weeks.
Yes, we will. So the next window for filing on the House side starts Wednesday, November 9th, through Tuesday, November 20th, 12 p.m. Keep in mind, sometimes, like, I'm still looking at LSRs being, they close, but as you know, when they process. That's where the fun will begin, everyone.
State's gears grind slowly occasionally, as we find, so.
Don't have a Senate deadline yet, right?
But from past experience, usually they will start trickling it out around Thanksgiving-ish. Not too different.
Oh, yeah.
Any other questions or? So we have, the joint board is, as I said, been meeting monthly. We've been reviewing an extensive list. I don't even remember how many were on the original list and got paired out, as the session continued.
There were,
Um,
yeah.
There were a lot, that we've been tracking, and I think the indication is there'll be another large number of bills that will have education funding ramifications to them. So this is not an issue that's gonna go away, obviously, so we're gonna continue on, with our efforts, as a coalition. And, in that vein, one of the things we're supposed to do every year is, review the memorandum of understanding. We've received, quite a few, responses back, indicating that communities are gonna continue, to participate, in the group, and, the authorization forms have come back. If your community hasn't returned a signed form, you can, email it back to Jim or myself if you would like. Both of our emails have been on emails that you've received. Right now, in hand, I believe I have 11 or 12 communities here, that have sent back, the actual form. We just like to complete the record, and do that, and we'll be reaching out to all those communities that we have not heard back from yet and find out whether they're going to continue to participate. I do know that two towns, Jackson and Northampton, are going to plan to continue to, they just have not held a selectmen's meeting, in time to get us a signed form back. So, they'll be added to that list, so we have 13 right now, fully committed. I don't know, joint board, I'm gonna leave it up to your pleasure. Do you think we should just take a vote on what to do, review the MOU, and, discuss that next? Okay, so,
Before we do,
yeah,
I just
yeah.
wanted to add,
oh, okay,
complicating things. Communities have said that, well, as long as the Republicans stay, really unlikely chance that something gets passed. And that may or may not be true. That has some validity to it. Or we don't know if that control is going to continue. Even so, we've seen a number of bills that were very innocuous and didn't follow very closely that suddenly took a twist or a turn, because they can have non-germane amendments added there too. And that's been the strength of having boots on the ground, Kathy, at these hearings, all that information. Sometimes those amendments are just procedural and never have a chance of making the light of day, but they still happen, and it's still a risk. So I just wanted to say that cursor to whether we continue in value, even though there hasn't been a lot of discernible effort to reinstitute donor tax or other funding mechanisms that would be detrimental to our interests. So, holistic overview of it is, yeah, we might fare well. The court cases play in our favor as a delay, but it's never going to go away. Of interest.
I can just weigh in and I think support what you're saying, Paul. I will say that, of course, so we'll have upwards of 1,000 bills filed this year, 800, 900, 1,000 bills, and we track dozens this, in recent time. Because to your point, a bill that doesn't look like it's directly on point can suddenly become on point. We're also coming into a budget year. So, once again, we're gonna have a budget filed. The governor will present the budget in mid-February. We're already having agency hearings about their anticipated funding requests. The budget is the largest policy document we do every 2 years. The trailer bill is a litany of policy changes and amendments, and in recent years, we've seen massive changes that are put in through the budget. So in addition to the normal run of the gamut bills we'll see, the budget's also gonna be a massive, document that's gonna require, careful monitoring and participate, in that process. Just one other thing I wanted to share, it was communications and legislation. On the communication front, I did want to share with everybody that, one of the things that the joint board, asked to have done a few months ago was to send out a survey, to candidates for legislative office. So a survey that, asks a series, which is common. Legislators often will get surveys from different, affinity groups, just asking for their opinion, where they stand on an issue. And we know that the response, from experience, the response around those isn't great. You're not gonna get 50% participation. But we thought it would be good, number one, even for those that didn't reply, to know that, remind them that you're out there, that you care about these issues, and here are the topics that we wanted to ask about. And the questions, wouldn't surprise you, what we talked about. General opinions on education funding, quality of education in your town, what you think sources of funding for education system ought to be, open-ended questions. And since our last meeting, we've gotten maybe another dozen or so responses. And interesting, the responses that we've gotten on those. I mean, you can see a partisan breakdown, as Paul points out, not surprising. From a Republican standpoint, their focus on education is more on content, and on some of the, let's say, social issues that have come before. For Democrats, it's a mixed bag. It's not all about education funding. And we saw some responses that indicated support for SWEPT as an income source. And so we thought it was a valuable tool to elicit, then not only to proactively let people know that you're monitoring this and you're interested in these issues, but to solicit some feedback. So we have some intelligence going into the next legislative session for some of the members. We heard from both a few senators as well as a number of state legislators and candidates for the state house. So in any event, I wanted to share that as part of the legislative piece. And we're soliciting that information. I know we talked about perhaps doing another bit of a nudge. Now that we know what the general election field is, we've winnowed it down some to nudge those who hadn't responded, to encourage them to consider doing so.
How many, you said about a dozen more since our last, meeting?
We've got about 70 responses now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And most of those are successful candidates who are running in the general?
Correct. So which means there's still a number more that have not, that I do think it would be worth us, perhaps nudging to encourage them to respond. We can discuss how to go about doing that most effectively. But I think any intelligence we get is good intelligence as we go in. I thought some people, it was good to see, I will say, that cursive writing is not dead yet. Some people took great pains to write us paragraphs worth of their thoughts in the open-ended questions. So it was insightful.
To add clarity to that, too, membership board very unanimously in favor of doing the survey. But we did have a long discussion about what we're going to do with the data. And because we are somewhat of a single to any particular candidate to share that in some sort of rating system. Right. It's more of a reconnaissance. Not really meant to be the gotcha. You're our favor. So to that end, I think we even survey said that we are making not to close the individual responses. We might aggregate them. Just in case of any of your boards or other people ask, well, can we get the results of the survey? That's not the intent.
Any questions about the survey or other communication? On communications, we, as the joint board, have been sending out regular emails with the minutes from the joint board meetings. I guess I would solicit any comments that you have. Do you think you're getting enough information about what we are doing on a monthly basis? Are there any complaints from your communities that we can do things differently or anything like that?
Have a website.
And we
I
do,
recognize that.
we do have a website. And I
And the
think
links to the
that'll be,
meetings are all posted on there,
that's
so,
right.
yeah.
And every community can join in on those joint board meetings. They're not just for. And I think that as, you know, especially in a budget year, and the fact that we could get more legislation that's aimed to education funding and donor communities as a whole, I would anticipate that in 2023, we'll have more communications coming your way. Probably will be more to talk about. I know it's been this off year has been pretty slow as far as group is concerned, although we did have a couple of bills that were exciting for a couple of months. So, but I think that we're gonna be communicating with.
Bear in mind, the first year of this COVID.
Right, and
First
right.
session, so everything was crazy and
Right.
off, and
Yeah.
going on during that period. So this will be really our first have real action.
Any other thoughts, Terry, Sean?
At this point.
Okay, if there's nothing else on communications and legislative, topics, let's, move to the next item, which is discussion of the memorandum of understanding. Along with the notice of the meeting, we sent out a copy of the memorandum that we're currently working under. That, will end at the end of this year, so part of the meeting today is to review the MOU, and then the next item of business is the reauthorization. So I hope that, your community's, governing boards have been able to, discuss this, MOU, and if there any discussion about, the current MOU wording or any concerns from your communities, about the way that we've agreed to be a group.
Obvious, but, this MOU was originally written at 2-year window.
Right.
Any renewal of it, Scribner note, updates to
Yeah,
move
we'll
it
have to
forward
change,
in the
we'll
other
have to
2 years.
change dates and
Right.
all of that, but, I think, not hearing any general comments, I'd entertain a motion to, reauthorize this MOU with appropriate date changes as a beginning, if someone wants to make that motion.
So moved.
Michael with a second, okay?
That's
So-
us.
so now-
I also add, and Jane, please, author of the, part of that motion has to be backed up with.
Right, is that the case? Yes. You, Michael, and Sean,
Yes.
council?
They don't approve it, I do that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any discussion about terms of the MOU in any way. I have two things that I'd just like to throw out personally, but I'll leave it up to you guys first if you have anything.
The only thing I had, then it comes to be a judgment, the question was, there's an explicit statement that, this meeting,
Yeah.
of the full board, occurs, after the legislative.
Close of the legislative
Close it, thank you.
If I just, I'm sorry, just gonna jump in real quick. Maybe we can just like make sure we just speak up a little bit so folks that are listening can hear. So just try to project a little bit.
All right.
And that is one of my items as
Oh, yes,
well.
there it is, right.
Yeah,
If we could just strike, in July, I
right.
missed and tried again in August and missed, so we're here, Thursday, December, so it's truly important after the session.
That was one of my two things. Right? Yeah, it was very difficult to try to get people together during the summer. Any other comments or thoughts on the MOU? My only other item was on page 7, under termination. We have had a couple of communities drop out of the coalition. The terms on how to do that, it says here that they shall give us the group 3 months' notice, or 3 months before the expiration of the 2-year initial term. Obviously, that's gonna have to be changed to the extension or whatever wording, we'll need to amend it. But do we wanna maintain the 3 months? Because some of the notification, or both of the notifications that we received were inside the 3-month window. So is it important to have that length of time?
I suggest we keep it in there. We're not gonna get it, but I suggest we keep it.
The purpose behind that is there are budgetary,
Right,
in and out at will, changes.
the
of
finance,
assessments that-
right.
that are not if it's, without terms, then.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure that we discuss that before moving on. Those are the only 2 items I had. The assessments, and the way that we calculate the assessments, within the agreement, does anyone see any reason for changing the methodology of how we do that based on total valuations of the town? Good. We'll continue to do that then.
Mark?
Yes.
And just,
Mhm.
section 7,
Right,
for that thing. Term ends in December,
so it should
at the
be,
call of the chair, I don't know.
yeah, it should be September then, right? So if we're gonna ask for 3 months notice,
You probably
so
should.
before, so that should say in September. Yep.
Permit the logistics
Right.
out so we can,
Other thoughts? a motion for reauthorization of the MOU, with, we
I
consider
concur-
these
I concur
friendly,
the amendments.
friendly amendments? Okay. Okay, and, we'll leave it up to the joint board if everyone's okay to update the dates and just make sure that in form it's the same thing. Any reason to do this or with anything other than a voice vote?
Well, do we have anybody online that's voting?
Oh, yeah, do we have any voting members online?
We just had someone drop a, is there anyone on, just make sure, the line at this point is clear.
By all those in, oh,
We need to ask the question.
Yeah, there's no one else on the line. Yep,
one is
we've
on-
confirmed, there's no one else
Okay.
on the line at this time, yes.
So, all those in favor of, reauthorization of the Coalition Communities 2.0 MOU, through December 31st, 2024, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay? Okay. Unanimous, thank you. Other business. I provided a financial report from the City of Portsmouth Finance Department. Thank you very much to the City of Portsmouth for helping our group out by handling all of our financial information. This is an end-of-month August report. I believe I've signed off on one additional bill for IT expenses during this month so far. So at the end of August, we're looking at $94,089.58 is our balance. The second page of the report summarizes the payments that we have received for the second year of the agreement. We'll be in touch with those communities that we're still showing as unpaid to find out what their status is moving forward. The four communities that are highlighted in yellow there still have credit balances from Coalition Communities 1.0. We have been drawing that down against their assessments, and that represents the roughly $83,000 that we Coalition Communities 2.0 with. Any questions on the financials?
Are the ones that have balance,
They're yellow: Portsmouth, Carroll,
but they're all
Rye,
negative
and
balances.
Waterville.
So
Well, they're
credits.
negative meaning because they're credit.
Right,
Yeah.
we have no one who is not paid.
Right now, we have no one, that's right. That's right, because I was looking at the wrong column, sorry. Everyone's paid.
Very small.
Yes, sorry.
Which focal length
I-
are you gonna get?
I also sent you an electronic copy that you could blow up to look at them, but,
Very informative, thank you.
yes. And, yes,
Springfield was unclear whether
They
they
were
ran
unclear,
around in
right.
the first place, so.
How does the portion?
Joint board,
Small.
joint board
Yeah.
spoke to that and given the balances that we do.
for 2023,
And they, it was like May,
yeah,
was that, or June?
it
So it
was
was
June.
pretty much after much of the expenses have
Right.
already been incurred, so.
Right.
You know, if it was in the first year, I think aggressive
Yes.
in that.
And we can roll that if we feel that we need the full amount, of the assessments. You know, the joint board can discuss rolling that into the 23-24 assessments, because I don't think it's, as a group, that it's gonna have a very large impact on us. We'll look at that.
Comes to discussion.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, the head nod is yes.
The head nod is yes.
Thank you.
Let the record reflect a yes.
Answer is verbally yes.
Good. All right. Well, we do appreciate it. The finance office is very helpful. Helen and Judy have been great. All right. Other business, admin, and our finding a new consultant.
Correct. So, for the benefit of the full board, we shared with the joint board at the last joint board meeting that, we would have to step back as your lobbying counsel. We've enjoyed our work with you, and we do enjoy our work with you. We've just been assessing internally our bandwidth and our ability to continue to provide the support that we know you need, especially as, and I want to reiterate this that Paul said, I do think this coming year, there's going to be even more going on, given the budget, given the bills, given we're kind of coming back now out of COVID. Can't tell you how different it's been in Concord the last 2 years than what we normally experience, and Kath can speak to that. It's COVID has really impacted how they meet, how they do their committee work, but we anticipate it'll be a more normal session, and so we've come to the conclusion that we're not going to be able to continue on given what our current workload is, workforce issues that we experience, much like Bonnie and I were talking when she got here about the challenges up in her area with workforce. And so at the last meeting, the decision was made by the joint board to reissue an RFP. 2 firms were pre-selected. That's a conversation that we thought, based on our experience, would be suitable and would be good to work with. One of those firms declined to submit a proposal. The other did submit a proposal, which I have shared. And so that's where we sit right now. The other firm has shown interest. They've submitted a proposal, and I await direction on how you'd like us to facilitate a conversation or other outreach at your discretion.
Here's where this oddity comes in. This is 2 meetings in one.
Right.
It's really a joint board responsibility. Healthy to have input from the members. Response was not responsive to what we hoped. It's open-ended in terms of they already before all the services that we. So that discussion as to what the response or.
So, I don't know if it would be appropriate to adjourn the full membership, meeting if everybody has to stay, or
And you're
if
welcome
we-
because it's.
And you're welcome, because that's fine, but we can have that have that conversation of how the joint board wants to, proceed, with the RFP process. We can do that right now, if that's what.
Need an elected official.
Yes, and yes, thank you, yeah. And we are only 4 right now. We do have a vacancy. It is an elected official, vacancy. And sometimes it's difficult to get a quorum of people, so we would really appreciate your communities, considering, having an elected official volunteer for joint board. The way we did this initially, we actually had a an election of the joint board members. During that, remember the COVID, was a remote meeting, when we had the first full membership meeting. Us were railroaded and, others successfully ducked the job, so.
And in fact, we had two vacancies,
And
of
we.
which I filled one.
That's right. So the joint board took action during the year, to have Paul, come on as a member of the joint board. He did have representative of management. So what is the full board's pleasure here? You want to take it back to your communities and email us, a volunteer name, and then the joint board can decide? So we will put it in the minutes
If
to,
I could,
yeah.
the MOU does speak to the
I know, and that's where,
membership, trying. In fact, authorizing the joint
well,
board
that,
to,
okay.
if it's only one volunteer, then
Well,
evaluate whether
it's
or
more-
not that
it's-
person is appropriate. Or two, if there are more than one, then we have a slate that we somehow run
Well,
remotely.
That's right, and there actually is the other four of us, actually, our terms run out at the end of the year. So, I guess that motion would be in order to, either reappoint the current slate or, make nominations for members of the joint board right now, would carry on from beginning on 1 January through the end of 2024. Or continue with our current joint board.
Money's really good, benefits are unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely, it's,
Now, I hear we're doubling our rate,
we are doubling the pay.
There's a rumor to that effect.
Yeah. I have not received any.
Call in once.
We railroaded Paul, and that was the extent of it. We have not had,
voluntary select them again. I think with the change in firms, it's great. I'll only express my own interest in.
Harry, are you?
I'll stay on the board. I never had so much fun, so I would never use that.
I know, me either. We're gonna have a discussion about chair, though, once we get the fifth member.
I'll comment about continuity.
Good, so I have a motion and a second to forward the, current slate of, the joint board, for the joint board, effective 1 January 2023, through December 31st, 2020. All right, so I have a motion and a second. All, any comments? No. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Hearing none? Unanimous. Thank you.
Just, if I make
Yeah.
one point, in finding a quorum with four can be tough. Everyone has a busy schedule. One of the bills that we tracked over the past, year and a half, you know, not directly on point with kind of our core mission, but obviously impactful on how this body meets, was legislation that would have made it easier, for bodies like this to meet remotely. We saw a lot of that instituted during COVID, and, through the governor's emergency orders, we were able to meet virtually, early on. When those emergency orders expired, then of course we had to come back together, and physically. So a bill got fairly far down the road, and got sidetracked like a lot of them do. I fully expect there'll be legislation in the coming year to bring back a concept of allowing public bodies, and they'll be impactful in your towns as well, to allow more remote options. Interestingly, the governor, I think it was this week, the governor was at a public meeting and, was talking about how, from a legislative standpoint, the committees in Concord embracing more Zoom, more remote options for committee members and for the public. And so, I thought that was interesting, him telegraphing some openness at least to that. So we'll see, and that could, of course, impact then what constitutes a quorum and the meeting concept here, but I do expect that'll come back next year, and there was some bipartisan support for it as well.
Are you looking for a strict,
I think it's in the MOU, it's governing board, right? So, yeah, it'd be
Okay.
selectmen and
Yep.
Town
the
council.
majority of our.
Yeah, city council.
In the MOU. Presumably, it's the representative of that community, and if they happen to be an elected official, whatever capacity, preferably a governing board, because that's the best liaison we want, but I guess.
you don't
Board of
know what's
Adjustment
going on,
is
you don't
both.
want them.
An elect, okay, anyone who's elected, not just the governing board.
Right.
Okay, an elected official.
Technically.
Okay,
So I guess,
We
yeah,
didn't get
the
that
elected
granular, I
town
don't
clerk,
think.
yeah.
town clerk or something like that. Okay,
So, that in, I'll put that motion, that position. Body will authorize the joint board to, or review any candidate that comes forward, and if there's more than one candidate, wait for the, or however.
however we can do it, please.
Right.
How about that?
Rather than having to drag you all up to
Right.
Concord just to vote on
Exactly.
that, and thank you very
Right.
much.
Right. So I have
You
a-
could simply vote.
that's the other thing.
If there's an agreement with that, I just didn't want to be, you know.
Yeah,
Sure.
we'll announce, if we get more than one candidate, we'll announce who they are, and if we only get one, then we'll let you know that that person's on the board.
Usually there's not a long line that we have to meet.
Yeah, right,
No.
right. It hasn't been a much of a vetting process at all.
Where have you been meeting?
We've been meeting here.
Now it's a motion to authorize the joint board to fill the vacancy for
Right.
the elected position, doing nominations.
Motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Great, thank you very much for that. Anything else, any other business? How does the joint board wanna handle the RFP situation?
We need to
Right
address
now?
it soon. Now, anybody wants to listen?
Have a motion to adjourn.
That's what it
Yeah,
say,
so-
unless there's any other comment for the good of the order of the full membership.
Full membership,
And then, before we,
okay? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we'll close.
Joint board
And
will
the joint
resume
board
in
will
5 minutes.
resume in 5 minutes at 3:00.
Thank you all.
Thank you.